Hello, everyone. Welcome to the session. So we have a few partners here today. We're really excited about this topic. Also to talk about some work that we've been doing on nature data for investment decision making with a few of our partners. So we're going to start off with a Mentimeter just to see who's in the room and get some thoughts. So if you can scan this right here, then I think the team will change eventually to the poll. Okay, I think, yeah, make sure to scan this one here, and the code is up there. All right, we're already getting some responses. I think the hidden one here is asset owner, potentially. If I remember correctly, it's a bit hidden. But then we have foundation, philanthropic, pretty even across the board. NGO, asset manager, we have someone from DFI, IFI. So we really tried to kind of have a mix of different organizations in the room because we find that, especially on this topic, everyone's working on it right now. Everyone's trying to collaborate, maybe not knowing how exactly to collaborate. So that was kind of, yeah, we were trying to have a bit of mix in the room. I see SEI has not responded to the poll, but we do have a research institution in the room. So, yeah, so I promise there are researchers here. You'll hear from them soon. Okay, yeah, I think we can go to the next one. Okay, yeah, but I think that, no, because I think it's like the Mentimeter is a different slide. Yeah. Okay, here's the next one. So how usable do you feel nature data is today for making strategic decisions? So in the session, we really want to talk about, okay, there's a lot of data collection, there's a lot of websites and organizations that are collating different data sources, and also a lot of money being put into data collection as well, but then there's also a lot of gaps. So kind of, what types of decisions can you make already with the information that you have at your organization and in the work that you do. So we have highly usable, already informing decisions, somewhat usable, helpful, but not decision grade, promising, but not yet practical, hard to use, too complex, not sure, too early to tell, we don't know where to start. So it's already looking somewhat promising. So let's see. Okay, I think most people have responded. So yeah, definitely looking good that people are feeling like they can make decisions already with information that they have. I think the panelists today will kind of probe some questions to the audience and bring up their perspectives. So we're going to go ahead back to the slides. And we'll start with Ed. So welcoming Ed from SEI. Just press it.
Good morning, everybody. So, in 2025, cocoa prices hit an all-time high. And the driver behind this was impacts directly linked to climate on producers. Depending on where they were in the world, producers were dealing with extreme heat, they were dealing with drought, or they were dealing with irregular precipitation. Linked to that was the fact that warmer temperatures are really conducive to the growth of the mealybug, which transmits swollen shoot virus, which then attacked a number of cocoa-producing areas, further compromising production. Now, over time, throughout the course of the year, a lot of these conditions were ameliorated, things got better, and the outlook for cocoa production improved. So as things were looking bad throughout the supply chain, we saw impacts on people's incomes and on projected earnings. Those then started to turn more positive as the year went on. The point here is that this was a one-off short-term shock that will happen again and again and again as the climate continues to change. And the reason that it's going to keep happening in many ways beyond the physical drivers here is that most cocoa is produced by small farmers, and those farmers do not have the resources to adapt to these kinds of pressures. We simply haven't seen the kinds of investment in their production necessary to insulate this particular commodity chain from these sorts of impacts. To do that, you need information, and this is what SEI does. The Stockholm Environment Institute works with partners to develop evidence and to develop tools that help inform decision-making, such as where to invest and how to invest to address this kind of shock. An example of this. This is hot off the presses. This has literally not been published yet, so you're looking at, for the first time, a map of what works in agrarian adaptation. For those of you working in the adaptation space, you might have heard that we don't know necessarily what works. That's simply not true. The evidence for what works is incredibly poorly organized. So I led this project from the SEI side, working with the CGIAR, to look at their database and say, all right, what do we know about particular climate stressors, the types of actions taken, and the number of times those actions either reduced someone's exposure to a climate shock or stressor, reduced their sensitivity to it, or improved their ability to adapt to it over time. This is exactly the kind of information people need to understand what they might invest in to bring about better adaptation outcomes, and of course that ties right back to the example of cocoa we were just talking about. That's on the evidence side. SEI also works to build tools that help inform partner decision-making. This is the Water Evaluation and Adaptation Planning Tool, or WEAP as we call it. It's been around for 30 years. Thousands of water decision makers use this tool to build scenarios that inform different kinds of decisions they might make about water. For those of you thinking about commodity chains, WEAP is used in the Central Valley of California, one of the most important places in the world for growing vegetables, fruit. That's our model, helping the California Water Board decide how best to allocate water in that particular part of the world. At the same time, we work in areas like the Vaca Muerta region in Argentina, helping communities understand how new fracking investments are impacting their water resources, helping empower them to advocate to their government for better protection for their assets, their water assets, their livelihoods, and their well-being. A key point here, SEI does not produce tools or evidence to tell our partners what to do. We work with our partners. We go on journeys with our partners to figure out what it is they need to inform the decisions they need to make and how we might best produce either tools or evidence to help inform that kind of decision making. That's why I'm here today. That's why I'm so excited, and SEI is so excited to be working with Clarmondial on the stuff you're going to hear about today. Because we've gone on one of these journeys, we're kind of part of the way into this journey, we're nowhere near done with this journey, to think about how SEI, with its global expertise, can help bring data and tools to bear on the kinds of decisions that inform things like investment in supply chains that can bring about better outcomes for nature and for people in the world. With that, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to hand off to Tanja and Selorm, who are going to tell you more about the work that we've been doing.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for coming to our session. My name is Tanja Havemann. I'm the co-founder and director of Clarmondial. We are an investment advisory firm working to connect capital with some of the places that is most needed for creating both economic benefits, but also nature and livelihood benefits. Maybe just to quickly draw a line to why we're here today. So Clarmondial looked for a partner to try to develop a way to shortlist indicators that were business relevant, investment decision related relevant, that we could actually pull into a new investment product that we're designing, the Biosphere Integrity Platform, and potentially also inform the existing Food Securities Fund. So we were lucky enough to actually bump into SCI at New York Climate Week and went on this journey with them, which has been really amazing. So very happy to have the chance to have this conversation here today. And in addition, after this, we'll also be hosting our partners from Indonesia, who'll be presenting some of the work around how they are looking at data and decision making, as well as also a panel with other groups representing finance and business to talk a little bit about how they see the landscape as well. So more to come. Great. Now, maybe Selorm, as a start, if you could maybe introduce yourself and what your background is and what you do at SCI.
Hi, thank you, Tanja. My name is Selorm Kugbega. I'm a research fellow at the Stockholm Environment Institute, and I work mostly on sustainable agriculture transitions.
Great. So I think SCI was a bit surprised, I think, when we went on this journey together. They were like, this is going to be very complicated. Do you appreciate that? So I think interesting to hear your reflections on, what it was like working with Clarmondial on this and sort of how you felt the journey was.
Thanks. I'd like to start a little bit where Ed ended off with the cocoa story, and that perhaps will showcase our motivation for working on this together with Clarmondial. It's a bit of a detour, but please bear with me. During my recent field work on transboundary climate risk in Ghana, I had the opportunity to speak with a cocoa farmer, and he was once time the best farmer in the district. I remember asking him what he thought the future of cocoa production was in Ghana. And he looked at me almost confused. And I think his face in my reading was wondering, why are you asking me this question? You should know this answer. And he asked me, what future? We just farm the cocoa for the government and the people are brought to benefit, which basically is you and I. And he said, we farmers have nothing to gain from it, just hand to mouth, which is just a euphemism for survival, basic survival. And then he continues to say, when this last crop dies, I want nothing to do with cocoa. Even sometimes I leave the cocoa in the bush for it to just be taken over by the weeds. And the bananas, which are supposed to be the companion crop for cocoa, are becoming even more profitable than cocoa. Then there's the issue of illegal mining, which is trying to take over some of the cocoa lands. And this farmer told me, I'm just waiting for the day these illegal miners get here so I can sell off my land and then get a lump sum so I can finally roof my house, which I've been trying to roof for the last 12 years. But why would a farmer say such a thing? The small farmers, they are supposed to be the base of the global cocoa sector, and we're in Switzerland, so it's fine that we keep talking about cocoa. To answer the question on why the farmers are thinking like this, and this is a question that I must say we researchers have answered long ago, 10, 15, 20 years ago, but it seems like the private sector actors are now waking up to the party and smelling the coffee. Labor costs are really high today because of the shrinkage of the colonial labor regime, which supported the cocoa sector for a long time. It was initially designed so that labor came from the northern parts of Ghana, cheap labor to support the cocoa sector. That doesn't exist anymore. There is a diminishing share of sharecroppers who are often caretakers of the cocoa. That doesn't exist anymore. You already know about climate change. And farmers are increasingly told that when they allow their children to get to the farm, it is child labor. And they think this is child socialization. So we don't know where the next generation of cocoa farmers are going to come from because these kids don't know anything about cocoa farming. They've not been socializing cocoa production at all. And then farmers, when they even plant trees on their farms as part of adaptation measures, do not get to own these trees. It belongs to the Forestry Commission or it belongs to some landowner. So what happens with all this? You hear about the global shocks, which Ed rightly described. Cocoa prices go up. We have factories shutting down and revenues drop across board. So after this interview, actually, I asked myself, what happened to all the knowledge that we have been producing over the past 10, 15, 20 years, and how is it that we didn't manage to get ahead of this curve? We researchers have known this for a long time, and it's a shame that we were not able to get ahead of it in time. But I think one of the main problems is that the evidence is not getting to the farmers at the right time. And even if it's getting to them, they do not have the capacity to implement it in a manner that it should be implemented. So they simply find the next best thing. They move away from cocoa production, they go to banana, oil palm, or something else. But if you're Nestle or you're Cadbury or you're Olam, you should be really, really worried about this kind of situation. So basically, we in SEI are interested in helping bring the evidence at the right time to the locals and translating this evidence for them to utilize to support decision making so that the transitions within the sector can be highly supported. And I must say that there is enough data that is available. The data is robust enough. We don't have to keep going on looking for data, the right kind of data. No. We in the research community, we're happy to go on a journey with you to try to make sense of this data and to look at the stresses that you might have as private sector actors in order to help you get to a point where you're happy with the decision that is made, both for nature, for people, and for profit. So just the long story about this is that SEI is interested in making sure that all the hard work we do with collecting the data and talking to farmers on the field and all that becomes something usable for society. That is what we want to do. Maybe another point. Can I? Sorry for the detour. I'm a storyteller. The second thing is that there is a changing policy environment and the need for increased compliance. Let's face it, there's a lot of legislation that is coming up in the EU and even globally. Just to name a few, you have the European Union Deforestation Regulation, which has been postponed, but we know it's coming. You have the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence legislation, which was passed, and compliance is going to start in 2027. We have the EU Green Claims Directive, which is also going to come in place, hopefully in the next couple of years, which is designed to combat greenwashing and setting stricter rules for environmental claims. And we are currently faced with low sustainability reporting, and that's what this directive is trying to, low quality sustainability reporting, that's what this directive is trying to fix. We want to move away from these big sustainability reports that pick and choose the lowest thresholds to claim sustainability, or vague words and a list of 100 things that businesses have done, like training people on good agriculture practices. Nobody knows what that means, what these good agriculture practices are. Or reporting half-baked solutions, which is that, oh, we donated 1 million trees to some group somewhere in Ghana, and they've not even accounted for the labor that it takes and the cost of the labor to actually implement and plant these trees. So we are interested as SEI in helping private sector actors actually navigate this changing policy environment.
Great. Well, it's been such a fun piece of work working with you and Selorm and Ed and the rest of the team. Just from our perspective, as sort of coming from working with large corporates and investors, we often kind of, I would say almost on a weekly basis, get pitched some sort of new nature metric or ecosystem metric. And I think it's challenging for us to kind of see how those might be usable across all the different types of things that we do. And I think that was one of the reasons we also wanted to work with a group like SEI. I'm just curious, sort of from your perspective on nature metrics, do you think that they can be standardized? Do you think that that's helpful from kind of an academic research institution? Maybe if you can elaborate on that.
Thanks. My view of that is that we need a hybrid approach, one that combines, or a two-layered system where we have both standardized metrics and context-specific metrics. And there's good reasons for both. For standardized metrics, we need metrics that can be measured consistently across geographies to enable easy comparisons and reporting and learning between different areas. And that also allows us to have some kind of accountability as well, because we have common processes usually with standardized metrics, and so you can be able to easily account for the claims that you're making. And some of these metrics could be, for example, land use change, which can be standardized across different areas, the hectares of habitat that have been lost or gained, for example, water use efficiency. These are things that can be standardized across board because you can compare, you can be accountable for them. So standardized metrics allow us to have a common understanding, and it allows us to even be able to have easy aggregation of claims across board. If there are different interventions that are happening in different parts of one space, you can be able to easily bring them together and aggregate because they have one metric that you're using to measure it. But I'm very much in favor of having a lot of context-specific metrics because nature itself is highly context-specific, which limits how much we can do with standardized metrics. So we need context-specific metrics that are adapted and tailored to the ecosystem and how it is actually culturally and socially organized. It should, for example, take into consideration ecological diversity between wetlands, coral reefs, tropical forests, grasslands, because in my view, a standard metric that is applied to different ecosystems without considering the context of both of them can lead to wrong estimations. For example, if you are restoring 1 hectare of wetland or the tropical rainforest in the Amazon, that may offer far greater value for nature than maybe 1 hectare of grassland or 100 hectares of grassland elsewhere. And that's why the context really matters, because a small change somewhere for nature actually could be more than some metric that is saying we have restored hundreds of thousands of hectares elsewhere. Great.
Thank you very much for that. I think we maybe have time for one quick question. Maybe if there's anyone from the audience that would like to talk to Selorm also afterwards, he will be around. But is there anyone from the audience that has a quick question? Otherwise, I have another question for him. So, yes.
Hi, my name is Sylvia. I wanted to ask a question about public and private partnerships and ecosystem, because I partially understand what you guys have been doing here. I've been working on the field for some time, and I wanted to understand how you do this, because it's actually quite difficult, and I feel that this is very tricky, especially when you're starting from strategy to implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the only trick is for both parties to be flexible and come to a common understanding of how this could work. I don't think, on a natural basis, researchers come from one arena, which is basically trying to make data publicly available and something good for the society and so on. In the private sector, you tend to, in the name of competition, keep things to yourself or have some intellectual property that, you have to keep the secrets of the trade secrets. Till today, we don't know the formula for Coca-Cola, for example, and it's been 140 years. So the trick really is to come to a common understanding between both the researchers, where they actually tell the private sector the needs that they have and how they would like to see this collaboration go, and the private sector also being flexible and receptive to that. And that's what we have tried to do with Clarmondial. We have made our interest known to them, and they are being very flexible. So you need two well-meaning and flexible parties to do this together. Otherwise, maybe it fails, yeah.
Great. Well, just before I move on to introduce the next two fantastic speakers from Indonesia, also just to say that we will actually be continuing this work, and Clarmondial will be taking forward some of this work actually in sort of a not-for-profit structure as well, and we hope that others can benefit from it. I think we're seeing a lot of interest, and we definitely see that there is a public good element to this work that really needs to be stewarded also, and really excited to continue to connect with others as well who are going on this journey. Thank you very much, Selorm. And now,
thank you.
Applause.
Catch me if you want to hear more stories.
Now I would like to invite two wonderful ladies from Indonesia up to the stage. I think the clicker is here, Inez. So Inez and Gita, why don't you come up and introduce yourselves?
Hi. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Gita Syahrani. You can call me Gita, and I represent the Earth-Centered Economy Coalition, or Koalisi Ekonomi Membumi, or KEM, from Indonesia. And here is one of our amazing member, Inez.
Hello everyone, my name is Inez and I'm from Supernova Equatora Capital. We are local capital providers that provide loans to value chains in Indonesia, especially cacao.
So before we tell our story, we'd love to show you some.
Misi TRV itu adalah salah satunya membawa coklat Indonesia menjadi salah satu coklat terbaik dunia dan kemudian memperkenalkan masyarakat Indonesia itu sendiri tentang coklat Indonesia yang berasal dari biji kakao lokal. Saya adalah bekas seorang jurnalis. Saya memulai bisnis pertama saya sekitar 20 tahun yang lalu. Lantas kemudian ketika pandemi, kala itu harga biji kakao itu cuma dihargai mungkin sekitar maksimal 28.000 per kilogram biji kering. Problemnya adalah yang dihasilkan bulk quality atau kualitas yang tidak bagus karena unfermented. Jadi kenapa kok nggak difermentasi? Karena memang petaninya nggak punya pengetahuan itu. Karena dengan fermentasi yang benar, biji kakao yang dihasilkan itu bisa bagus kualitasnya. Dan biji kakao yang bagus itu adalah raw material yang bagus untuk bikin coklat, dark coklat yang baik. Equatora itu memberikan pinjaman lunak yang kami gunakan untuk membayar langsung petani.
Equatora telah menyiapkan dana mulai dari 500 juta rupiah. Tapi tentunya dana ini bukan hanya mereplikasi dari tempatnya juga, tapi membuat lebih ajak dari bisnis modelnya. Kami bisa dengan leluasa membina hubungan dengan TRV dan mengetahui lebih jauh tentang data-data perusahaan di TRV. Tapi kenyataannya, di luar kolaborasi kami, sangat-sangat sulit untuk mencari perusahaan yang comparable dengan TRV. Apalagi, benchmark industri kakao di Indonesia saat ini belum ada. Dalam kelanjutannya, kami membutuhkan aktor-aktor lain. Nah, aktor-aktor lain termasuk di policy, di communication, dan juga pemain coklat yang lainnya.
Berupaya untuk menghadirkan ruang-ruang di mana para aktor bisa berkumpul, bisa berkenalan, dan bisa membangun rasa percaya untuk kemudian berkolaborasi secara nyata supaya rantai pasoknya bisa lebih kuat daripada dia hanya mengandalkan transaksi jual beli saja. Dan mereka menunjukkan bahwa 5 tahun ke depan demand untuk kakao premium, khususnya yang berasal dari biji kakao difermentasi, bisa naik hingga 566 ton lebih. Artinya potensi ini besar sekali untuk bisa dimanfaatkan oleh Indonesia.
So that's the story. And as you can see from the video, there is a very strong reason why Indonesia's cacao value chain can actually be the turning point for Indonesia. There's a high possibility of breaking into the premium market through fermentation. There's a higher chance to actually give better income for the farmers through that model. And there's actually stronger market access possibility. So the real question is not why hasn't it worked, but why hasn't it scaled? And to give you a context for that, there's a single data point that we want to focus on. By 2040, our government is actually targeting downstream investment and allocating more than 90% to 3 sectors: coal, mineral, and oil and gas. And less than 10% goes into agriculture, forestry, fisheries, and plantation. And this is why this single data point is actually a proof point why this journey is urgent for us. Trying to paint a better picture through responsible bioeconomy that has very distinctive characteristic of utilizing biodiversity in a responsible manner, providing value added through innovation and technology, while at the same time having the assurance to continue and work on the well-being of both ecological and social factor to the community and to us all. Now, in our coalition, the Earth-Centered Economy Coalition, or CEM, one thing that we know for sure is everybody is working on it. It's just that everybody's working in silo, just like what Selorm just mentioned. This picture looks very simple. It's just a bunch of people that's smiling. But this actually is our long-standing work of 2 years of trying to dismantle the silos. Who you look at in the picture represent national government, local government, farmers champion, processing company, large-scale buyers, and the community themselves, all in one frame. And this started from building trust and relationship. Because for us, data and information will never get collected unless the actors trust each other, unless there's relationship among the actors that's strong enough to withstand this complex process of negotiation. I love the question about public and private partnership. If you put community into the mix, it gets even more complex. And one critical actors through our learnings that we studied are very under-supported is the midstream actor. The midstream actors that has the power to actually collect and work directly with farmers on the ground, so you can get nature data, you can get finance data, you can get climate data, and you can get social capital data as well. While at the same time, midstream actors also work with buyers so that they can get the requirements that EUDR wants. They can get the complexity that market in Asia also requires. And they can actually be the middle actor that pulls all of this value chain together. From our learnings in the past several years, we notice that without relationship and trust, there is no confidence. Without confidence, there's no data. And without data, it'll be impossible to get finance. And for this, it requires system problems to meet amazing leaders just like Inez. Inez is one of our funding members in CEM. She works at Supernova Equatora Capital, and they work exactly to solve this problem, trying to support midstream actors with the right type of financing to unlock their ability to become the change makers of the entire value chain. Because essentially for us, the entire coalition, and hopefully the entire country, transforming cacao value chain and any responsible bioeconomy sectors means transforming relationships into beyond transactions.
Hello. Again, I'm Inez, and I like the way the Gita described me because it's not often you find investors introduced by hugging other person. I must admit, I'm a little bit nervous, so forgive me if I'm reading my cheat sheet here. But as Gita mentioned, Supernova Equatora Capital is focusing on financing the midstream agent or midstream processor or enterprises as we call it. These are the processor aggregators, especially for us. They're the ones who are working in food and beverages and health and beauty and health and wellness sectors. I want to dive deep on why we're focusing even on the midstream actors. Because these people made value addition happens. This is where the quality gets decided, and this is on a cacao cases. This is where the fermentation happens, and this is where the farmers get rewarded, or not. The midstream actors actually transfer farmers' effort into market reality, but they're one of the most underfinanced actor in the whole supply chain. These midstream actors are too big and probably too for-profit for grants, but also too small and too complex and too demanding for the conventional institution, for the conventional financial institution. But for cacao, if the midstream players are failing, it means that fermentation cannot happen. The buyers cannot have a reliable supply. And the finance never comes in for the whole value chain. So midstream, it's not a niche, but it's actually a critical infrastructural hinge in cacao ecosystem. And so this is why our capital is targeted specifically to the specific gaps. We are financing, among other three critical things that need to be happening. The first one is shared service layers, because fermentation goes for all. And also the first risk capital, and the learning risk as well, as Terfe has just begun their fermentation learning. And these are not add-ons. These are what needed by the midstream actors to start functioning as a system builders and not just go on about their own siloed business. And once this layer exists, three things will happen and unlocking. The first one, the quality of the cacao beans become more consistent. And the coordination actually enabling all those, the coordination for the data, the coordination for the production. And the third part is, and I think is the most important that Gita mentioned, is the trust started to permeate across the ecosystem. And that's when a meaningful data can appear reliable and trusted. Because financing is not a reward at the end, but it's actually a precondition for responsibility and scale. So at this point of time, what kind of data that we need for investment to become reliable? The business stays agile, but stay responsible, and the livelihood remains dignified. Again, from our experience, we see three things. The first one is the business reality and cash flow truth. This is when we see, is this business alive and growing? And also the second part is obviously the impact data, including the ecological livelihood, but also power dynamic. Who gets benefit the most when the business is growing and who actually absorb the risk? The last part is the context, the system risks, and where this business embedded in. What kind of policy, landscape, and market system is this business exposed into? And again, here's the core insight for today. No relation and trust means no data. No data means no confidence. And no confidence means no finance. So that's why we are building the trust infrastructures here, the minimum shared evidence needed to make the long-term capital stay. So who's with us?
Thank you so much, everyone. One last invitation from our side is come and enjoy the actual cacao right outside. We have a table set up and you can enjoy our tempe cacao and other variety as well. Thank you for listening.
Great. So just to say that Clarmondial has a partnership with Supernova. So it's been great to work with Inez and her team for the last couple of months, and looking to see how we can collaborate to also bring more funding into the types of businesses that she's working with. And I think Gita is just a star that works with so many different institutions, both public, private, in Indonesia. So I think they both have super insight in terms of how nature data can be used by all different types of stakeholders. So maybe just a quick question to you both in terms of how would localized nature data be helpful to the different stakeholders that you work with? Maybe just some quick reflections. Gita?
Just building to what was said in the panel before, right, Tanja? Contextual matter. I think the important thing in terms of looking at data is not only the perspective of who wants the data, in this case, maybe market, right? But also, who does the data belongs to? So unless the community actually understand why nature data also important for their day-to-day living and lived experience, it's very hard to actually get it synchronized. So one example from a cacao project that we do in Bali is we did a research on biodiversity enrichment for a certification process. But at the same time, this is also about reliving memories of the community, of how it feels to live in the forest back in the days and right now, which species are still there, which species are thriving, and most importantly, how does this correlate with the type of production that you can actually absorb from agroforestry? So they would do this modeling where the amount of ants species and the amount of spiders would actually affect your vanilla production or your cacao growth. So at the same time, the community can see the interlinkages among those data. And the last point would be, once there's research and data available, you give the data back to the community so that they can use it and they can make decisions based on it.
Thank you.
For me, again, building up from Selorm's point, it's, we kind of have to sit together and agree what is the data about, and then get creative in terms of pulling out context. Who knows, maybe in a couple of weeks later, we'll look at the population of ants and butterflies as an indicator of us giving them a loan. Aside from obviously the other regular thing like financial checkups and P&L and whatnot. So that's translation that goes both ways, right? Even us bringing our story here is like we think a lot on, like 50% is the content, and the next 50% is about translation. So you see how nervous I am trying to put forward that the language that I'm not using, in daily part.
Great. Well, it's so wonderful to have you here. I think we're so impressed by both of you. And at Clarmondial, we really want to build an ecosystem of partners that are really sort of actually trying to do real things on the ground, also backed by science. And Inez and Gita will be here. So maybe if you give them a round of applause, and you can connect with them later on. Now, for the more business and financing part of our panel, I would like to invite Esben, Loris, and Gonzalo up, please. Great. So we also wanted to have perspective. So Clarmondial does work on financing, but we work more on the credit side. So for us, it was really exciting to also have the chance to hear from other sort of funding players and financing players that might be thinking about nature data and how to use it. So very pleased to have quite a diverse set of people here. Maybe if you can introduce yourselves very briefly and sort of what relation you have to nature data, what type of institution, how you're working on nature data. Esben.
Thank you. Esben. I'm a forester, and I work for Forest Investment Manager. We look after and manage around 1.2 million hectares of institutional investor-owned productive forests in North and South America.
Loris?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll stop there. Or
if you want, you can also go on the nature data side because you're doing.
Yeah. So as forest managers, we've used data since we started managing forests. It's intrinsic in because we need to make money out of the forest products we produce. So we've been looking after these trees since we plant them. We make sure that they grow. So it's very much a local and like hands-on data management that we've done for ages. What I think is coming out now is, should we do more? Should we capture more data than the data that actually we've been capturing related to the production systems forever? And that's what we're exploring now and thinking about how we can do that.
Great, thanks. Loris?
Hello everyone, my name is Loris Compagno. I work at Swiss Re as a climate and nature specialist, and I'm responsible for doing assessment of risk of our clients regarding nature risk.
Maybe just talk about like who your sort of clients are and how they might also use this sort of data briefly.
Sure, so we work with large companies, normally these are global companies, and they use our data in order to get more resilient, but they can use our data or we can help them also for doing reporting. So these are the two main reasons why clients comes to us.
Great. And Gonzalo? If you could just please introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Gonzalo Castro La Mata. I am the CEO of the Earthna Center for a Sustainable Future at Qatar Foundation in Doha, Qatar. Earthna in Arabic means our legacy, so we are a think tank that work along all dimensions of sustainability, especially related to hot and arid environments.
Great. Now, maybe staying with Earthna, I think Earthna is a very interesting platform. I think working in some very interesting regions. So maybe if you can talk a little bit more about the focus of Earthna when it comes to sort of nature, and how do you see that groups like Earthna can play a role in trying to advance some of this topic around sort of nature and data and resilience?
Thank you so much. Yeah, when I've seen the previous presentations, I greatly enjoy seeing the pictures of the forests, the rainforest, the water, the soils, the agriculture, and all of that. So when we talk about sustainability, what comes to mind is Indonesia, is Brazil, is Costa Rica, is countries that play a major role in these global ecological cycles. Well, Qatar is a very tiny country. It's the hottest country on the planet. It's the driest country on the planet. It's the only country that doesn't have a permanent body of water. So Qatar doesn't have rivers, lakes, streams, nothing. And it's amazing how this territory has created one of the most advanced societies on the planet. So sustainability means something very different. And we've been working on trying to develop these sustainability frameworks for a country that is so stressed in terms of natural resources. Now, this doesn't mean that there is no biodiversity in Qatar. When we look at the desert, we are pushing a campaign that says that deserts are alive. When you look at the desert, it looks as if there is nothing. But very once in a while, it rains in Qatar. I've been in Qatar 4 years, and it's rained, I think, 5 or 6 times. And when that happens, there are seeds that are on the ground, and all of a sudden they sprout, and they are alive for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. They flower, and they go back in the form of seed, and they die, which means that there is life in the desert. We just don't see it, and that's a very important concept in terms of resilience for these types of ecosystems. But there is also a very rich marine environment in Qatar, including mangroves, including coral reefs, seagrasses, that is very critical for the tourism industry. Now, going beyond Qatar, which is an extreme example, and moving more towards the MENA region, I think the connection between nature and livelihoods is very, very strong. If we think about our ability to survive if we lose the forest in Brazil, the Amazon rainforest, and all of that, that tends to be an abstract concept. There is a connection, of course, but if we lose 20% of the Amazon, none of us are going to be impacted. In the MENA region, where you have ecosystems that are much drier, these drylands are a direct connection with the livelihoods of these people. And with climate change, you start to lose these drylands, you lose the soils, you lose the water, and you lose the grasses, and people have to move. And then there is conflict, and then there is migration, and then there is civil war, and there is all kinds of problems for those people. So looking at, and going back to your point about how important it is to be localized, an hectare of rainforest may be very important for humankind, but an acre of grass for these pastoralists is incredibly important because that's their livelihood. So I think from Earthna, we bring a slightly different perspective to understand how sustainability globally also needs to include countries like Qatar and countries in the MENA region.
Great, thank you. Maybe moving to Brazil, because it's a region that your institution is working in a lot. I think from a Timberland and real asset investor perspective, you mentioned that you've been starting to kind of look more, like you already collect a lot of data, but how do you already assess nature-related risks and opportunities, and what sort of data are most critical for your decision-making now, and how might that evolve in the future?
Yeah, thank you. So, also reflecting back to what we heard before, what is important to us, and I think also to most land stewards, is it needs to be operational relevant, and I think that's important for a Ghanaian cocoa farmer and Indonesian cocoa farmer, and it's also important for a forester. It needs to be operational relevant, and then secondly, it might solve, or it might be able to provide additional intelligence, but it also needs to be something that you get paid for. So if you want to capture some kind of other data or other nature information that doesn't, it might be there, and you might do it because you just want to do it for some reason, but capturing that data and showing it and reporting on it, it requires some kind of payment for that activity. So I think that's central to what we do today, and so the things that actually we do capture and do work on is for instance carbon, because now we recently, or is now 5 years ago, but we've started a new strategy where we focus on reforestation and restoration. It's been massively successful, and we now have great partners with a number of new, very very amazing investors and carbon buyers, including Microsoft, that is buying lots of carbon credits. And then for that, there's payment. So we need to capture that. And that's, of course, new type of data that we are using now. And there's lots of things that we can do to maybe do that more efficiently, quicker, cheaper, and more precisely. So that's one of the things that we focus on. Of course, the other element is looking into the future. Risk is a very important issue to our investors. They are real asset investors, and they don't like risk. So allowing us to look into the future and understanding future risk, for instance, in terms of climate risk and weather risk, it's also part of the analytic portfolio that we now also deploy. We also want to be very tech-enabled, and one of the things that we've done is we started also investing from our own balance sheet in nature tech. But coming back to the usefulness, we've been presenting lots of very interesting metric gathering technology companies, people that have been able to do amazing things on sensors and nature data and intelligence, and from an initial point of view, this is amazing. Yeah, we should do this, and I've been taking it in. I'm sitting in this IC for our venture, and then I present this to my portfolio managers, and they say, yeah, beautiful, lovely, but who's going to pay for it? And that's, I think, one of the main challenges we face, that there's no incentive. How can I capture this biodiversity data if nobody is paying for it? And that I think that remains a challenge for a lot of this additional nature data that we now are seeing.
Great. No, I think that's a very useful perspective, and I think we can all agree that there is enough data to do a lot of things already, and sort of how we fine-tune that, there needs to be a business case. And maybe moving on to a business case, I think, Loris, you sit in a very interesting role with Swiss Re Corporate Solutions, working with some of the large corporates where they are coming to you and asking about sort of risks and nature risks. Maybe just talk us through what are the main kind of questions that large corporates that come to Swiss Re Corporate Solutions are looking to have answered with respect to nature and nature data.
Sure. So thank you, Tanja, for the question. So what we do at Swiss Re is to analyze for our clients the climate and nature-related risk. And how we do that, we merge the data that we have, our proprietary data, or the data that we acquire, or we use also peer-reviewed publication. We merge this with the information that we get from our clients in order that we can assess the risk for the locations and for the portfolios. And then the clients can use this data for getting more resilient, or this data can also help them for doing reporting. So these are the two main reasons why clients come to us. And maybe to your question, how we do that, we support TNFD's LEAP approach, which means we first locate, evaluate, assess, and prepare. We really follow these 4 steps. So the first one, locate, we look where are the locations, which could be the main risk, which are the dependencies, which are the impacts, and so on. Then we go to the next step, evaluate and assess. So here we go really ecosystem over ecosystem to understand which are the material risk for the client. For example, we see for one location there is high risk of water stress, for example. And then we analyze it a bit more into detail, and maybe we can do also some analysis about how it will change in the future. Will it increase maybe? Will it decrease? And then there is the last step, which is the prepare step, which in my opinion is the most important one, because we can give some insights to the client on what they can do in order to get more resilient. If I go back to the example of water stress, maybe they can recycle some wastewater, or there are other solutions in order that are less dependent by water. And speaking about data, I think also one of the reasons why clients choose also Swiss Re for doing this analysis is because we have at one location, really on one platform, all this different information. They can do also NatCat assessment if they're interested, which are quite strong. They can quantify the losses. They can do climate risk assessment, nature risk assessment. We have layers, let's say, about snow avalanches, which in some areas here in Davos, it's also quite high. We go also to some more remote risk, like glacier lake, outburst flood, which I have often explained to the client, what does it mean, and where it is high, where it's low, and so on. And I think having all this data just in one place, this is quite unique for the client, because then they can do different assessment for their all locations of the entire portfolio. And yeah, up to now I spoke about data, importance of good data at one place, but I think also quite important is the interpretation of the data. I often say it's like going to the doctor. When you feel bad, the first thing which they do normally is a blood analysis. And then maybe you know, yes, your iron level is too low, magnesium level is too low, and the sugar level is too high, like always. And then your question to the specialist is, so what should I do now? And there you need interpretation of the specialist to really understand which, or better said, what you can do in order to get more resilient. And I think this is also really important.
Great. I think, so it's been interesting to hear from sort of Esben looking more at the commercial side, and also you looking more, Dr. Gonzalo, from the sort of resilience side. And I think you've had a very sort of long storied career across different institutions, and also with actually relevant academic background as well. And I think you've been through a few of these different cycles where the reframing around nature has changed. And I think we're at this inflection point at the moment as well, where nature is maybe moving away from just being something that's a CSR element to something that's really being considered as fundamental in business decisions. So it'd be interesting to hear about, like, you know, what are some of the insights that you've gathered from decades of being in sort of around this space that might be helpful for the global nature and impact investing community?
Thank you, Tanja. I'm not that old.
That's not I wasn't referring.
But I'm gonna build from what Esben said, and I'm gonna use an example that our good friend Marco Lambertini, always from Nature Positive, always uses, which is a fish that is swimming now in the ocean is worth nothing. Okay, that fish on a net of a fisherman is worth maybe $3. In the market, is worth $10. And on a plate in a restaurant is worth $40. Now in Davos it's worth $80 actually, as you can probably see. So the big problem is the externalities. Nature and ecosystem service are free. We don't pay for those. And 30 years ago in the World Bank, we started to look at ways to internalize these externalities into the mainstream economic system. So we incubated things such as a Forestry Stewardship Council, which relies on certification so that the consumer can make sure that there is a pull from the market for sustainable forests. The same with the Marine Stewardship Council that we also incubated. We did the first project on certified coffee that was under the shade. Back then, development agencies were moving coffee farmers to cultivate under the sun because it's much more productive and you use lots of inputs, chemical inputs, etc. And you lose the biodiversity. So we tried to answer the question, how can we keep the forests and how can we keep these farmers profitable? And we certified that coffee. We demonstrated that there was more biodiversity in those fields, and then the people were able to sell the coffee at higher prices because it was certified and the consumers would expect that. Today, of course, there is all kinds of coffee, certified coffees, cocoa, and all of that stuff. Then we moved to payments for ecosystem services, and one of the most amazing examples is Fonafifo in Costa Rica, where farmers are paid to keep their forests, and the money comes from a tax on gasoline, but also from your water bills, because when you open your tap and there is water, that water is coming from the forest. So this is a way to bring back that money to incentivize the farmers. And then after that, of course, to me, the big opportunity was RED. And I was involved in several RED projects, which actually were incredibly difficult to make in terms of the standards, social standards. Some of them were more strict than World Bank's environmental and social standards. And unfortunately, there has been a campaign to take away the credibility of the RED. I'm afraid that this has been a huge loss for the advances that we have made. But I think the big message is that we need to keep trying to monetize nature. And I know that sounds bad, but frankly, it's one of the few ways that we're going to make progress at a scale. How can we make people to pay for ecosystem services? And now let me finish with a slightly different angle, which is it's not just that. I think that because of this utilitarian approach that we're all promoting, we're starting to lose the value-based conservation of nature. In Qatar, which is a very religious society, Islam teaches societies that we don't have the right to destroy nature, we have a duty to protect it. And I think bringing back the ethical values for nature, I dedicated my life to protecting nature, not because I was afraid that the planet was going to disappear, but because I love nature, and I think many of us in this room think the same. So let me just finish with an example of what this means. Let's say that you have a donkey, and the donkey carries your things, and you feed the donkey, you give the water to the donkey, you bring the vet to the donkey, so that that's sustainability. You want the donkey to be sustainable because it's useful to you. But when the donkey is old and can no longer carry your things, do you still love your donkey? Do you still respect that animal because it's part of the creation? And I think that bringing those values into loving nature and respecting is also very important as a complementary approach to how we can actually protect the planet.
Great. Thank you very much. Maybe have more questions to Loris and Esben, but I'll stop here and see if anyone from the audience has questions, because it always makes the sessions a little bit more interesting. Maybe if we can take a few, if we take 2 or 3 in a row.
Hi, Luana Maya from Nature Finance. My question relates to several topics that we heard here in the several panels. I also work with cocoa producers in Brazil, and we are thinking about creating a biodiversity-linked insurance, for instance, to try to help farmers transitioning to a regenerative agriculture. So I'd like to see and hear your view on that, especially on Loris, why we don't have so much insurance products for making this transition more scalable and viable in short term. Thank you.
Great, maybe we'll take a few.
Dr. Gonzalo, I really like that Costa Rica example. It'd be interesting to know if you know of any other pre-distributive initiatives like that, because the difference between that one and others is it's not redistribution, It's pre-distribution. It's changing market structure. And I think that's what's needed. So be curious to know if you or anyone else has seen success at that political economic level in other countries that we can build on.
Is there one other question? Otherwise, we'll go to those.
I'm Renat Heuberger of Terra Impact Ventures, and my question, Dr. Gonzalo and the whole panel, it's true that Red Plus and other instruments have been heavily criticized, and there was a campaign. But what do you see in terms of alternatives? Do you, for example, see that any kind of nature credit is about to come up that could come into its place?
Great. Maybe I'll let each of you comment on those as well. I mean, I think there's also a few other examples that we can talk about in your question, but maybe Dr. Gonzalo, do you want to go first, perhaps?
Sure, thank you. I think the FONAFIFO, going back to that question in Costa Rica, is an interesting example. The problem is that when you have an ecosystem, the ecosystem services are lots of services. Climate regulation, pollination, water capture, seeds, biodiversity. And each one of those services can have a buyer, but there are no buyers for all of the services. So if you have a forest, you can find buyers for the carbon, you can find buyers for the water, but who pays for the birds? Who pays for the function of the ecosystem? That is a true externality. And I think that's the great challenge for us right now, for all of us as a community, to find out ways to monetize those values. And I think that goes back to the other question, which is markets for nature. Yes, of course, I think that many people now are trying to work on this. The question is, how do you measure, how do you value, and who pays for it? With the carbon markets, it's a fairly easy issue because there is a unit, which is the ton of CO2. And if you cap ton of CO2, then you can measure it, and you can actually say how much CO2 I'm not emitting or I'm capturing, whatever. So that's a unit that can be monetized and has a price. Whereas nature is much more difficult. How do you put a value on a bird or an ant or any of that? And I think that's a challenge for all of us. And there are many, many people working on this issue now. And my hope is that, in fact, in the future, there will be these types of markets that can pay for pure conservation.
Just say that in Vietnam and China, there are also similar schemes in China at a sort of regional level. Maybe on the insurance question.
Yeah, to the insurance question. So products related also to nature risk. Like we have one for coral reefs, which goes into that direction, and also many other projects. But of course, that's always open also to have new one. So if you want to come to me then after the session, I'm happy to discuss about that.
I think the Great Barrier Reef Foundation also structured a very interesting nature insurance product that you might want to look at as well. And then Esben, I don't know if you have any comments, including...
No, I have and linking on to the markets for nature. If we succeed, and maybe with data, you would be able to succeed in getting something that a market for nature. But fundamentally, I don't think it's possible to develop a market because there's no buyer for that market. And essentially, you need to have like some kind of unit that the buyer needs to buy for them to satisfy whatever they need to satisfy. And in carbon, we have an emission estimate of the specific buyer that they can then say, yeah, I'm doing all this work inside my own supply chain. I'm now have renewable energy and whatever. I'm buying credits for the residual. But we won't be able to develop that metric for the buyer. And as we are not going to be able to make that metric for the buyer, then as much as you make a market for this nature credit, it won't be able to sell because there's no natural buyer. Then it's just glorified philanthropy or extremely expensive philanthropy. So unfortunately, I think we need to find, and I agree, I really hope that we can find markets and internalize the value of nature into economic systems. But developing a nature market as a generic number that there is a market for, I don't think will arrive anytime soon.
Maybe also just a quick comment from our side, from Clarmondial. So we don't work really in carbon markets. We do advise on some transactions and we manage a portfolio on behalf of a client. But obviously the data level that you need to have for a carbon credit transaction is very different. I think where we see the opportunity is also around sort of the supply chain and supply shed resilience, because I think there we're seeing just huge risks as being recognized more and more by corporates, by governments, by other types of institutions. But the challenge there is like, you know, one institution's resilience is not the same as another institution's resilience, is not the same as a local community's resilience. So finding out, you know, what are the overlaps that then can be useful and usefully addressed in a cost-effective and timely manner, I think is where we're really interested in building partnerships, because we do see an increasing interest from larger corporates, from governments to work on these kind of topics, but it becomes very localized, and then having a clear process for understanding, you know, and shortlisting information that's good enough at the right time to the right stakeholders, I think is what we see as exciting.
Tanja, quick. Oh.
Because I think that we are assuming, sorry.
No,
yeah.
Please.
We're assuming that we need precise data to do this, but let's give an example of McDonald's or Burger King burger. Instead of costing $4, it should cost $5, and that dollar extra should go to protect the Amazon rainforest. I think that we can bypass many of the details, and because we understand what that burger is causing in terms of deforestation. And I think we have to be very creative in just jumping across and putting the market money into the ecosystems.
Yeah, here, I totally agree. It will cost money to change. And I think that's developing the data isn't solving for that. It actually only makes it more expensive. But just a quick comment on nature and valuing nature and nature markets. We have it somewhat already, and we have it internalized in high integrity carbon credits. So and one of the reasons why we're doing much more now on capturing our nature footprint in the investments where we have significant carbon exposure or carbon credit exposure is because we are getting premium prices because we are developing high integrity, high quality carbon credits with significant co-benefits. And of course, if we are claiming towards our buyers that we have all these co-benefits of nature and people and whatever, we have to document that. So that's of course important in terms of data gathering.
Great. Maybe just another quick round of questions to you, and then we'll see if we have more time from the audience. I'll go on, Anke. I'll take one question from you.
Sorry, I have not listened to the end. But my question is, what is the role of frameworks like the SBTN framework? You know, the carbon credits are used also to compensate carbon to reach the target. What do you think? What can frameworks do to develop the market for biodiversity credits?
Should we take one more question while we ponder that?
Yeah, I'm Satya. We build nature economic zones in India. My question is, we'll talk about why biodiversity is difficult to measure, why nature is difficult to monetize. I think all these things come down to our fundamental inability to process why nature is a long-term infrastructure, and the Excel sheet for a long-term infrastructure looks very different from the Excel sheet if you draw up a real estate project. It is a poverty of imagination somewhere, and the narrative shift, the stories around how we look at nature have to change for this to be a lot different. Is something like that happening in the world that you're seeing and the work you're doing?
Great. Maybe reflecting on those, but then also a question to you all from me, which is, I think it's always interesting for the audience to hear kind of what partnerships or what kind of groups you might be interested to talk to and why. So maybe also you can respond to that question, and if you have any comments on the other two questions. Maybe Esben.
Yeah, so alliances and frameworks or the partnerships, I think it's, of course, it become it become very politicized, and I think that's one of the challenges. But I think what it helps is it allows people who are less informed an ability to actually do something, because there's a group of people that have endorsed some certain actions, and I think that's powerful. Of course, the challenge then is what actually you agree on. And there's a long debate on what you actually should or shouldn't do in relation to what SBTI is doing. So I think that was my primary comment. And
maybe quickly on partnerships or what would be interested to discuss, and then we can move along. And
yeah, partnerships. I think that what I think is really interesting is in terms of capturing data that can allow us for long-term modeling of risks into the future. And that, of course, requires quite broad landscape level data. And developing frameworks where people can contribute data into a common pool and use those data for themselves, for risk modeling or future modeling, but at the same time retain their own data for their own purposes, I think would be something valuable to us, that there is these frameworks for comprehensive landscape level data gathering and collaboration.
Great. Loris?
Yeah, maybe what I can add, so we all know nature risk, it's a very complex topic and it's really also difficult to analyze it. And what I can say, since we're a global company and we work with global clients normally, we often wear our global lenses on. So we like to analyze things globally, and this means we like to compare one location in the US with one in Europe, with one in Asia, which means we need good global reliable data. But we see when we speak about nature, it's also really important to get to regional or local data, which means that we should really collaborate with the local and regional stakeholders to get those information that maybe on a global view it's difficult to get. So this is a first point. And a second point, I think, is also really the importance also of collaboration with academia. Because I think it's just to collaborate also with academia and then putting together different views, we can also create new data sets, which then can be also used by everyone to understand better the problems, and then so the entire society becomes more resilient.
Great. Last but certainly not least.
Thank you. Yeah, on frameworks, I think this is critical. I think that on biodiversity frameworks, we are where we were with carbon framework maybe 30 years ago, and I see that there are quite a few now emerging, and there is a very healthy competition. I think that's very good. But I hope we don't need to wait 30 years until we have a standard that we can all trust. And one of the issues is that the standards don't have to be perfect. You can have buffers, you can have prices, you can have different mechanisms to make sure that you solve a big chunk of the problem, even if it is not 100% of the problem. So trying to get a framework that is perfect goes against the practicality of having a framework that allows you to move on now with something and to get some money into the field. And then in terms of partnerships, I think that the traditional partnerships have been between NGOs, academias, philanthropy, and all of that, and that's great. But I really think we need to bring in the investors and the insurance companies, because the same way as for carbon, there is a unit which is the ton of CO2. An investor has one unit in mind, and that is the dollar. There is a bottom line, and that means that there is a very practical way to understand what works and what may not work.
Great. Well, please give a round of applause to my panelists. And from Clarmondial's perspective, watch the space. I mean, we are going to be announcing something very cool on the public good element, continuing the work with SCI. And we'll be excited to also work on some new partnerships this year. So please keep in touch, and also feel free to look out for our wonderful panelists afterwards. And thank you very much, Green Up.
May I ask everyone to stay seated for a while and for a small activation. Thank you, Tanja. Thank you, Elisa. Thank you, Clarmondial. Thank you, our partners and speakers. That was exciting. And now it's your turn. So, I did give you a pre-warning that we would be doing a small activation, a small exercise. You will be handed out post-its, small post-its with markers. And I have one question to you. You heard from experts, from several speakers, you get new insights, new input, learnings, perhaps ideas. Please reflect on what did this session move in you. And write down one commitment. I said that this Climate Hub Davos is about connection, collaboration, and then also action. So what did this session move in you, and do you have perhaps a commitment? And it can be big or small. It can be about what you want to start, what you want to stop, or perhaps something you want to continue doing. Write that down, and there will be 2 spots in the foyer when you exit the theater to place those post-its. First, on your right side, there's a window, connection window. You can place your post-it there. Or there's also a connection book that you can use to write down your request, your question, perhaps your offering. And are we all set for our final inspiration? So I say that Roland Siegenthaler is here today with us to live illustrate this session, to give you something visual and very tangible to look at. And I give the stage to Roland to share his takeaway from your session. The stage is yours. And this is for you as inspiration.
Is this live? Yeah, wonderful. Hey, thank you very much for this rich inspiration of how data can attract investment. And we're waiting for the next slide. Genau, and Elisa introduced that to that round, and how can data from nature composed by this chameleon get investors to sort of pay for nature's services? And Ed started with this wonderful story, it was actually a dramatic story. From the cocoa farmers, drought, bugs leads to shortage, leads to loss of income. And Tanja then introduced Selorm. And he told us about, how can we sort of pay nature, or actually pay nature, or have a more resilient system so that they don't go from cocoa to banana. That'd be a disaster for Switzerland, or actually get the land for mining, or just not losing knowledge. And the data is actually there. We just need to look at it and interpret it in the right way. And it's always easier said. We plant 1 million trees than done. And we got a tree is not a tree. How can we sort of like qualify that a tree in the rainforest just has more value natural-wise than one in your garden? No offense. And that we share data. And obviously Coca-Cola has taken this initiative, and they share their recipe just for the good of the world. There's some sugar in it, that's what we know. And Inez and Gita told us how in Indonesia they collaborated. That it's not only about oil and timber, but about agriculture as well. And it's actually not enough so in silo we fight our own battles and struggles. We need to collaborate to access the apples, or to strengthen the midstream actors, get a consistent quality and data about it. We need to actually share the data. That requires a relationship, and then there's confident buyers. And yeah, we need to count, for example, butterflies and biodiversity, and that suddenly that would influence the stock market in a magic way, that butterfly. And yeah, the new round with Gonzalo, Loris, and Esben. Yeah, even the smallest, tiniest creatures in the desert of Qatar deserve our attention. Because, yeah, if we just leave it up to chance, there's drought, there's flight, there's actually all sorts of problems we don't want to have. And yeah, for example, we can plant trees and sell that to Microsoft. That was sort of the selling case. Or we could actually collect data, but actually who is buying that and paying for that? And there was an answer, because it helps reporting, it helps building resilience in your business model. And yeah, I mean, we got to act on the data. If you go to the doctor and you have a lot of data and you keep eating that cake every day, yeah, it's not gonna make you feel better. Yeah, and there's different type of fish. Fish in the water, $0. Fish in the net is $3. Fish on the menu is $80. But actually, there's sort of one case where you actually wish you left it in the water when you're sort of, yeah, with food poisoning. You'd pay probably $1,400 for this fish not to be in your stomach. Yeah, we say actually, yeah, pay for nature services like the dollar reef that's growing and is preserved. But Esben said that's pure philanthropy of a fishantropy, if I may that wordplay. And yeah, but how can we get people sort of reward nature for its amazing services? I'm sure the answers are in the room and the inner entity to sort of pay for that. Thank you very much for this rich inspiration.
Thank you, Roland. Thank you. Thank you, Roland, for sharing your talent and view with us. And thank you all. This is it. We now need to clear the theater for next session. But hey, let's not stop here. Let's take action. When you exit the theater, there's a good food bar. Enjoy beverages, food there. Connect with each other. Share your thoughts, questions from this session. And I'm sure our panelists and partners, they are there to chat with you. Thank you, everyone, and see you around.